He's an award-winning author. He's an Alzheimer's advocate. He serves on the board of Us Against Alzheimer's. He's Greg O'Brien. You're going to find out a lot more about him on this edition of This Dementia Life. Hi, I'm Brian LeBlanc. I am the host of This Dementia Life, and I am so happy to have on the program today Greg O'Brien. Greg O'Brien is not just an award-winning author, but he's active in so many other things, and he's also a friend of mine. So, Greg, it's nice to have you here.
Brian, it's a pleasure to be here. How you doing?
I'm doing good today.
Good.
Doing good today. How are you?
Every day. Yeah, usual stuff.
Yeah.
Just get used to it.
Yeah, you're not kidding. Now, if you don't mind, speaking of the usual stuff, let's talk about briefly your history when it comes to Alzheimer's disease.
Sure. Alzheimer's took my maternal grandfather and my mother and my paternal uncle, and before my father passed away, he was diagnosed with dementia. I started the symptoms several years ago. I had two serious head injuries that doctors said unmasked a disease in the making. And I also carry the Alzheimer's gene, which I believe you do too, APOE4. And it's progressed from there.
How have your days been? How do you cope when you're having a foggy day or just of that nature?
Well, every day is a new day, and I'm kind of a tough-ass Irishman, so I just know how to fight. But 60% of my short-term memory can be gone in 30 seconds. I don't recognize people I've known all my life now more and more, including my wife on 2 occasions. I see things that aren't there, go into tremendous rage. My filter and judgment are in the toilet. I'm not allowed to drive anymore. I've had blackouts and parts of my body collapsing because brain signal's not connecting. And, the brain not only affects your thought process, but it's really the command center for your body. And I saw that with my mother and others. In this disease, not only slowly does your brain break down, like having a sliver of your brain shaved every day, but your body starts to break down. And you'll notice that a lot of people who have Alzheimer's, when they die of something else. Some people die of Alzheimer's. Some people die of a stroke, or a good example, I have no feeling now from in both legs, from my feet almost to my shins, and in parts of my hands. So it's a slow, steady decline. I also have cancer, which I'm not treating. It's my exit strategy.
And, you talk about your legs. You used to run a lot, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I was a jock, played baseball and football and basketball. And when I was I'm 68 now. When I was in my early 60s, I could still run a 6-minute mile. And wow. Not bad for a 62-year-old.
No, not bad at all.
But now what I do is I go to the gym, and I also have, because the body breaks down, I also have spinal stenosis and scoliosis. So other than that, everything is going pisser. And,
other than that, you're doing just fine, aren't you?
Well, fine. Don't worry about me. But I go to the gym, and I just refuse to lie down. And a lot of people, well, let me answer your question, because I'm going to get lost if I don't stay on track, as you know. I go to the gym, and I will put the treadmill up to an elevation of 15, and then crank the treadmill up as high as 6'2", and do my miles that way, walking. There's no pounding, but right. It's like a race walk.
Wow.
And then I'll go lift light weights.
Well, it's good that, they say that staying active physically also helps you to stay somewhat cognitively present.
Yeah,
So
and I think you have to work at that, and I'm a writer, and so I write for several hours a day, and particularly I work out and I write toward the end of the day when I feel I'm drifting off, or when I feel a little foggy. I will discipline myself in that way, and I think fighting this disease takes discipline, and I think you have to fight it with obviously good medical advice, and I'm on the highest medications I could be on. But I think you have to fight it with faith, and you have to fight it with spirit. And the minute you start to the minute when I have days, Brian, where I go, what the hell? Do I really want to do this? I start to drift, and I was really depressed several weeks ago before Christmas, and I just said, I'm tired of this fight. It's kicking the shit out of me. And late at night, because I'm walking, I can't drive, I almost stepped off a curb into an oncoming car.
oh gosh.
And I say this just to let people know about the fight. I don't want anyone's freaking pity. And talked to my wife about it, talked to my pastor about it, and I thought it was healthy that I talked about it. And something pulled me back, which I believe was the hand of God saying, no, it's not your time. And so anyone who's watching, is whether they're dealing with this disease or they're a caregiver, my only advice is to keep the fight up. There are a lot of people in disease, whether it's cancer or dementia, who can be taken out quicker. And there are others where it lasts a lot longer. I've had cancer for a number of years. So why are some people taken out quicker and others last longer? If I knew that, I could tell you how many angels dance on the head of a pin.
Exactly.
So, but the point is, every day has to be a fight. You have to stay in the moment, and it kicks the crap out of you. But it's better than just drifting out. And I think some people, I need to be careful here, give up too easily, and they probably have given up throughout their life too easily. And I can't change that for them. I can just urge them to pull up the big boy and big girl pants and fight on if you can. It's much better.
That's exactly right. You and I, we met one another in 2015 when we served on the early stage advisory group for the Alzheimer's Association.
Right.
And as alumni members, we're still active in what we do with the advocacy.
Yeah, the Alzheimer's Association is incredible. So they've done wonderful things and
given us some pretty good opportunities to speak to groups that we normally wouldn't be able to speak with if we were just on our own.
Yeah, I mean, I was recently, and you were there too, I was honored to speak before the National Institutes of Health.
Yeah. And you did wonderful, by the way.
Well, I as you know, I'm at the stage now where I have to read from my notes or prepared speech. I can't ad lib.
I can't even remember the questions that I have. So,
okay. All right, there you go.
They're all written down, Greg. You're not alone in that one, buddy.
Yeah.
All right. So in the beginning, I mentioned that you are an award-winning author.
Mm-hmm.
And you wrote your first book, and it was called On Pluto.
Right. Actually, I'm a career journalist.
Right.
Worked for newspapers around the country and wrote several books, but this is a book about, it's called On Pluto, Inside the Mind of Alzheimer's. And wrote it 2 years ago from about 4,000 pages of notes. What happened is when I realized I was forgetting things, I started because I'm a trained journalist. So that's another thing that helps me in this disease. And so I would type up all the memories that I had that I didn't want to forget. And then I started keeping a daily, almost hourly journal of things that were happening. And the book came out. It's a first-person book from inside the mind of Alzheimer's. I think it's the first book written by an investigative reporter embedded inside the mind of Alzheimer's, chronicling the progression of his own disease. And I have, and then there's a new expanded edition that will be out the end of February, and it's going to be distributed by Viking Penguin and Random House, and it's about 50,000 additional words and 12 new chapters, and you're in it, as you know, so there you go. You can read about you.
I wasn't going to.
And why you need your head examined.
Exactly. I wasn't going to mention that, but thanks for bringing that up. Yes, I'm in Greg's second book. So, but how did you come up with the name On Pluto?
When I was an investigative reporter in my younger years, covered organized crime, the mafia, Mexican mafia, Aryan Brotherhood. It was, pretty grueling investigative reporting stuff, but I loved it. And so when I would talk to a lot of people with investigative stories, and we go off the record. And when I was a young kid, I was fascinated by the planet Pluto. And it was just this distant place. So I'd always tell my sources, we're going to go off the record. I'm going to take you out to Pluto where no one can hear what is being said. And then over time, all of my sources over time would say, you're going to take me to Pluto again? And I go, yep. And then, later in life, when you get together with your buddies, or women get together with their friends, and you talk about the unmentionables in life, my buddies, when I started to tell a story, they go, are we going out to Pluto? Said, yes, we are. And so finally, in the throes of this, as you know, you have to fight against these urges of drifting out. And I think you drift out for a couple reasons. By the way, all I did in high school was cut up a frog. So people should medically take what I say and go. But I can put it in layman's terms. See, now I just forgot what I was going to say. See, you started laughing, and then I forgot.
Oh, sorry.
I could ask you, and we're talking about Pluto. And so I had to kind of invent a place when I drifted out where I was going, and I started to call it Pluto, and taken my family and friends there on my drifts, and I told them someday I'm not coming back from Pluto, and I wanted you to know where I was.
That's awesome. Yeah. When you have two people with Alzheimer's in a conversation, and one says, I forgot what I was saying. Where was I?
Yeah. Hey, chances of you remembering are zero.
And for those of you that don't know, I also have Alzheimer's. I also have 2 copies of the APOE4 protein. And, Greg and I hit it off immediately when we first met one another. Our senses of humor are alike.
I think you had a dress on the first time I met you.
You weren't supposed to say that. Okay.
All right. Say there's our filter again.
I might have to tell the producer. Maybe no. I'm not going to cut that out. That's fine.
Mike's a good guy.
Yeah, I know.
He understands Irish humor.
Okay, so that's your book, and then your second book is Beyond Pluto. But there's also a short film called A Place Called Pluto. And this was done with you as a subject. And it was directed by a award-winning director, Steve James.
Yeah.
Now, tell us about that.
Steve did Hoop Dreams and Life Itself, the biography of Roger Ebert, and is an award winner, nominated for Oscars and Emmys and all that. And what it just chronicled the journey of a family, and that's important thing to say about Alzheimer's. It's a family disease. It affects the family, and it affects all types of families. I mean, Alzheimer's respects no demographic. There are, I think, as you know, far more women, I believe, than men, and with blacks and Hispanics. But Alzheimer's doesn't care whether you're straight, you're gay, you're what. If there's anything that can pull all of us together of different faiths and backgrounds and things like that for a group hug, it's Alzheimer's, because
Right, exactly.
it affects people of every range.
Yeah, it knows no boundaries. You
Yeah.
know, it's one of these equal opportunity diseases that can affect anybody at any time, regardless of genetics.
Yeah,
Also,
and
you know,
just because I think this is an important point about, there's a total downside, but the upside, if there was ever a disease that can bring people together, and no judgment, no nothing, we all share this, and you have great compassion for a whole wide swath of people. As I said, doesn't matter about your race, your color, your gender, your sexual background. It means, like, we're all in this. And if there was ever an equalizer in life, it's this disease where, man, I see someone with a disease, and right away you want to just go hug them and say, hey, how can I help you?
right.
And this world is so damn judgmental, and this disease cuts right through that.
Or you go to them and say, "Hey, I know what you're going through," because, well, to a certain extent, because of the whole snowflake, theory.
Yeah, but yeah,
We kind of know what one another go through, which brings us all together, which lets us form that bond that is, for the rest of our lives.
yeah.
So I guess I'm stuck with you.
Well, yeah, but it's funny because, with your sense of humor.
Yeah.
No, seriously. I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the creepy little dolls behind on the shelf, and I'm saying, if one of those starts to move, I'm calling the police.
Well, he's got a bobblehead there, so
Shit.
That's just the
All
way.
right. No, I was waiting for one of them to move.
Well, I tried to get a different background today for,
Okay.
so this is my bookcase behind me. So.
I take it you love your dog, so we all know that now.
Yeah, yes, I do. And he was sitting up on my lap for the longest time, but now he's on the floor. So, so did we ever get to the film? Did you talk about the film?
Oh, no, you asked me about it. See, here we go. Here we go again.
Steve James.
Maybe what we should do is have a call-in where can call in and they could bring us back online and say, well, I have a question about this because the dumbass didn't answer it.
Exactly. And folks, just to let you know, this is how Greg and I converse even in person. We'll start talking about one thing, go off on a tangent on another, and then neither one of us can remember where we began, so then we go off somewhere else.
But it's all
never dull.
It's all spliced together with humor, and I think this is so important. If you can't laugh at an enemy, the enemy intimidates you and owns you. So I try to laugh at this disease, and I think that's important. And but anyway, getting back, I do remember now the film Steve James, because he's such a wonderful man.
Yeah.
He did a short film about the journey of our family. My wife Mary Catherine and my son Brendan and son Connor and daughter Colleen and our dog Socks, who's not with us anymore, and just the journey of a family. And it's on the website livingwithalzheimers.org, I believe. But if someone Googles Living with Alzheimer's films, they'll come across it. Very
cool. Now, tell us about the book that you're working on right now with Dr. T. Terry Brazelton. It's about aging and the last touch point.
Yeah, Dr. Brazelton is...
Brazelton, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Dr. Brazelton is one of the foremost child doctors in the world. He's akin to a Dr. Spock, going back to the baby boom generation when we were raising our kids. And he's a doctor in Boston. And award-winning writer, was an Emmy award winner. He had a television show, and he's considered a world-renowned a child doctor. And so he's close to 100 years old now. And I first met him when I was a senior writer at Boston Magazine, and my young son Connor had colic, and he was up like 12, 14 hours a day crying. It was like, man, it was tough. So I convinced my editor at Boston Magazine to let me write a column about colic, but the reason I suggested it is so I could call the world's leading expert, and he would take my call, and I'd end up doing a good story, but I'd get good information. So he took my call, and we did the interview, and at the end I said, you know, I got to come clean with you. You know, the real reason, I said, first of all, I'm going to do a good story. It'll be good. It'll be good. I promise you. And but the reason I called you was to get information about my son Connor. So we spent another like hour on the phone, and we stayed in touch all those years. I was 28 at the time, and his wife died of Alzheimer's, and he took care of her. And now he's writing the book From the Cradle to the Grave, how people as they get older embrace the last steps of life. Whereas early on, he was teaching the new parents, which were our age, how to care for their young children and how to allow the children to grow. Now he's in his book, The Last Touch Point, and we're still working on it, how he is teaching those who we taught how to raise their kids, how to embrace the final steps of life.
Wow. It's a heavy, kind of a heavy topic there.
Well, it is, but I feel honored that I've been able to spend time with him. He's an incredible individual.
Well, I mean, those of us that are living with, you know, some sort of dementia, we know that, well, we don't know when our end will be coming. But there's preparations that can be made, you know, before then, so that when it does happen, we're, you know, our families and friends are just not left out in the cold.
But I have this approach.
You gotta have everything.
Yeah, I like to quote the great Bugs Bunny, who once said, "Don't take life too seriously because nobody gets out alive."
Right.
And I remember when I had my diagnosis, the neurologist, because he knew my personal physician, who was one of my best friends, and he said, you really got to drill through this guy's head to get to him because he's such a damn stubborn Irishman. You got to take a 2x4 and whack it between his ears. So he's going on and about the disease. And then he puts his pen down and he looks at me and he said, I'm talking to you like you're terminal. To which I said, aren't we all? So again, I don't want to call it a blessing, but in my journey nobody leaves this planet alive. And this has allowed me time to think about things I might not otherwise think about, to mend fences that I might not otherwise think about mending, to make changes in my life that I might not otherwise think about. And I always tell people I'm the most imperfect guy in the world still. I've committed every sin a man can commit but murder and adultery, and I've been tested in both. So I'm no altar boy, but I have a strong faith in God, and that makes me whole. And every day I try to get up and do it better, failing all the time, but never stopping to try to do it better. But and that's where this disease has taken me. So I could have laid down, and I know there are people who tend to do that probably did that all their lives anyway. But I refuse. I would urge anyone in anything they're going through, grief is important, whether it's cancer or Alzheimer's or another horrific disease or a trauma in the family, whatever it is, go through the grief, but don't lie down.
Yeah, I always use the term, you know, of having a pity party.
Yeah, finish that line because it's a good line.
Yeah, when you have a pity party, there's only one person at that party.
Right.
You know? And that's you. Nobody else wants to come to your party. So after a while, it becomes a very boring party.
Yeah.
So most of the time, you pull yourself up. Now, you and I, as advocates, we're fortunate in a way that we're asked to speak all over the country and beyond, and because people are used to hearing people talking about the disease. they don't hear enough from the people that are living with the disease. You and I and many others, we talk about our lives, and we talk about our lives openly. How do you feel about the effect that has?
Well, I think we tried it the other way, and so far it hasn't worked. We have some of the smartest minds, men and women in the world, looking for a cure. And guess what? We're not there yet.
Right.
We have a lot of people who have declared victory, and I always joke, because I like the guy, so I don't want to get hate mail from people, but it reminded me of George Bush when he landed on the aircraft carrier, declaring victory when Saddam Hussein was captured. Well, the war went on for a long time, and that's where we are here. And I think what is happening is people want to hear more from the patient perspective, so they understand what it is, so they might be able to come up with ways of coping. And I think in this disease, you got a couple of things. One, you want to stop it, maybe, or push it off in younger people. So that's one thing. But number two, you want to help people who are on this train deal with that better. Is there any magic wand? I got to tell you, I don't. Have we cured cancer? No, we haven't. People still get AIDS, okay? People still get ALS. So come on, I don't. I think we got to get real. It maybe in a couple generations from now, I don't see the magic pill. I do see them being able to spot tendencies or get inside your head and see tau and find ways to block that out, or whatever the correct medical term is, so a stage doesn't start till later on in life. I think we can get there. But this is not a simple disease. You're talking about inside the mind of Alzheimer's, and we need to get real about it. And I think one of the best ways to get real is the patient perspective, which you've been so good at, and others that we know.
Well,
those dolls are starting to move now. I'm just telling you. Particularly the ones with the wings, they're flapping now.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Maybe it's time to go.
I don't.
But I always tell people that what I do and what you do, as far as advocating, yes, we share awareness and we educate, but there's nothing that's going to come along in our lifetime that's going to basically help us.
No.
But what we're doing is, and with others, we're paving the way. We're making people more aware, which is why I started doing this show, because I want to reach as many people as I can to make them aware of what this disease is, what it does, but more importantly, that people like you and I, we can still live somewhat of a good life. Yeah, we fall, literally and physically, and we have bad days, but that kind of goes with the territory. So there's the last question for you.
But that note too, which I think is so good about what you're doing, what I'm trying to do, it's about the next generation. It's about our kids and our grandkids. It's about the kids and the grandkids of people who might be listening. It's about getting people to talk about it, stripping the damn stereotypes away, that this is not a disease. No one wants to talk about Alzheimer's because it freaks people out of your mind until they're at your wake, or you're 80, 90 years old, and as Bugs Bunny, we're all going to die. But what about the people on these journeys who are younger? And I know you're younger than me, who have to deal and fight these symptoms the disease can take 20, 25 years to run its course. They say that the pathology can start when you're in your 40s. So that's a lifetime of a disease. And we need to, and this is a disease that is not going to affect 1% of the population. This disease is going to take out a generation. And we need to start to talk about it and get comfortable and push the damn stereotypes aside.
Well, I think you just answered the last question I was going to give you. So thank you.
Reading from your notes, the camera is on your notes now. I learned as a reporter to read upside down. And those damn dolls, that guy over there, the head is like moving now. Holy shit. Yeah, bobblehead.
There we go. So yeah, that was a good way to wrap it up, because going into this, we kind of knew what was going to happen. And we knew that there wasn't nothing that is going to be done in our lifetime. However, there are small breakthroughs that have been made. But at least we know, and we still don't allow that to stop us from getting out there, which I hope, you know, I hope the world is touched by some of what we share.
Well, you focus on what you can do, and you graciously let the other stuff go. Quick shout out to Mike Belleville, who does your technology work, and I hope you keep this in. Mike is we got a lot of brothers and sisters in this disease, and Mike is a brother, but here he is. He's in the throes of this disease, right, and he can still do the technology. So he's producing your show, or whatever the title. He told me his title was Emperor. I don't know. What do I
He's the magic man.
Yeah, and he said he's like the puppeteer. He really has his hand, and he's making you talk. But that's his story, and I'll let him tell it.
And
love you, Mike.
and I do want to say one last thing to thank you, Mike. But I do want to say one thing to you. Thanks for keeping this PG, because I know that usually when we're in person, our language gets a little salty,
a little coarse. A lot of F-bombs dropping, but I think I was on good behavior. And,
you did great. Well, Greg, listen, thank you so much.
Those shock things you put on my hand really work. So
yeah, well, you know, I had to do.
I get a jolt, and I go, well, it's not worth it.
I had to say I had it in my hand right here. So
I know, yeah.
All right, but listen, Greg, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Thank you for your insights. I'm sure that people are going to get a new perspective and learn a little bit more about Greg O'Brien and where Pluto is and how it came about.
Well, God bless you, Brian.
The content of this video podcast is intended for discussion purposes only. The views expressed by the podcast host and guests are their personal views and do not constitute an endorsement or agreement by the Dementia Action Alliance. The purpose of this video podcast is to enable, empower, and encourage those of you who, like me, are living with dementia. But it's also to educate about stigma and the misperceptions about dementia.